disinformation, weaponization. Those were just a few words Hunter Biden employed to describe an op-ed published in USA Today, lambasting conservative media and politicians for their persistence in coming after him. In the piece that published yesterday, Biden's second son tore into the political right for using his struggles with addiction and journey getting sober as a weapon against his dad, President Joe Biden.
In his rare public comment, Hunter Biden wrote, quote, "My struggles and my mistakes have been fodder for a vile and sustained disinformation campaign against him and an all-out annihilation of my reputation," unquote. The president's son maintains he is and will continue to take accountability for his past. He's facing federal gun charges for his gun possession, and his past foreign business deals are under scrutiny from the House of Representatives. So I think, Hunter Biden, the big problem I have with what he wrote in this op-ed here, he talks about getting sober and how this is, the main problem is that everyone's talking about my drug use. He said, "The weaponization of my addiction by partisan and craven factions represents a real threat to those desperate to get sober, but are afraid of what may await them if they do." I don't think the average person who wishes to get clean from an addiction will look at the Hunter Biden case and the House Oversight Committee's actions and say, this could happen to me. Right. I'm sorry, that went a little too far. I get that he is going through it right now. And he admits, I'm a very privileged guy. I get that I've done certain things. I don't like that he's trying to get sympathy from a community of addicts in this way, saying that this could happen to you. It can't. It probably won't. Unless you're the president's son. Most people aren't.
Right. This is complete gaslighting of the American people. He is trying to shirk responsibility for his very real mistakes that might have been related to his drug addiction and that his decision-making faculties were inhibited, but that doesn't excuse him or absolve him of responsibility. The idea that the average drug addict, as you said, is collecting millions of dollars from a Ukrainian business energy company or sitting on the board of a Chinese energy company and potentially selling out the American people and using his father's name to get access and money is absurd.
We don't know what crack might make you do, Amber.
Yeah,
all of those things.
And the idea that his addiction, where he's addicted to crack and cocaine and all manner of other things, and blowing his money on like high-level escorts and staying at these fancy hotels, the idea of that being the average addict's experience is, I think, a testament to his privilege and the fact that he doesn't truly understand it. To try to create a community with people who struggle with addiction to prescription painkillers or people who are dying from the fentanyl crisis, where drugs that would typically be considered relatively safe are laced with fentanyl and they accidentally overdose. I mean, to compare your plight to the plight of the working class who turns to addiction as a salve to financial and physical health woes and mental health woes is frankly ridiculous and insulting. I think this guy should be ashamed of himself. And the other thing is, when you get sober, one of the things that you're supposed to do is take full accountability for the things that you did while you were under the influence and the harm that you may have caused. And the fact that he is using it as a shield, his addiction as a shield to shirk responsibility, tells me that clearly he is not taking this process seriously.
Yeah, I think that's really fair to say, and an important point. Because if he wanted to humanize himself and gain some sympathy, this op-ed wouldn't read the way it does. I take accountability for my actions and whatever. I grew up with a lot of privilege, blah, blah. Take accountability. Say what you've done. Say what you are remorseful from. Literally go through the process. He could have done that in this op-ed, but it just didn't read that way. It read like someone in a comms department drafted it for him, which I would say is likely the process that this piece went through before it got published. And Hunter Biden made some tweaks, added a little bit of his personal flavor, if that. And then it went out to the opinion section of USA Today. I just don't think this was the right approach from a communications perspective as well, because of course that's not going to come off as relatable. If he wanted to write an op-ed, he should have done so really honestly. I mean, people connect to human stories. He didn't do any of the storytelling. It felt just very plain and very processed. And I think if he really cared about everything that was going on in the news, he would do more appearances. Like, he would talk about it himself. He wouldn't publish, these opinion pieces. I think if I was in that position and people were using my reputation to slander my father, who is president, I would want to take a more active role. And he comes up with a lot of excuses for why he doesn't. And moreover, I would be vehemently saying that my father had nothing to do with my business dealings, which he said before, but he doesn't make that the main thrust of this piece. He's not saying it really hurts me to see my father go through this. What anyone would think if they were a son or a daughter in this situation. I just don't get that from him. And so it feels like more of the political class making excuses for their privileged children. Some of them coming from the comms department of the privileged children, maybe him directly. I just don't like it.
It's this narcissistic idea that he is the true victim in this scenario. When he, as you said, is putting his father, now granted, I believe that Joe Biden obviously had a role in Hunter Biden's business dealings based on the testimony and evidence that we've seen so far. But if that were not the case and his father was being unfairly maligned, then you're right. He would be expressing more empathy and taking more responsibility for the fact that his father is dragged into this. And instead, this entire op-ed reads as a woe is me salvo. And it's clear as well that he's not actually interested in taking accountability because of this plea deal that was worked out with his lawyers and the DOJ that blew up famously in front of the judge, because a part of that deal was that he would avoid prison time on the gun charges if he pleaded guilty to the tax charges and paid back the IRS the money that he owed. But also included in that deal, which the judge didn't even know about until it apparently came up in court, was that there would be a clause granting him immunity for anything related to the facts of the case, which included essentially all of his business dealings. So if there were a case where there was fraud or bribery or any of these financial crimes, he wouldn't have been able to face accountability for those. So for him to sit here and say, I'm taking responsibility, as you get the sweetheart plea deal, you have IRS agents testifying to the fact that they were encouraged to not investigate to the point that they could get to President Joe Biden. Everything about this reeks of a cover-up. So are you taking accountability really when you just plead out to community service or probation or whatever he ends up getting in this case? It's obviously a sham.
Especially comparing it to what the average person would face if they were found in possession of the drugs that we know he's been taking. The thing about accountability, you're so right to call that out. I think about the gun possession charge that they tried to get him out of, that the judge was like, this is such a ridiculous thing to promise that we will not prosecute you from a crime unrelated to this one that you have likely committed because you're entering into a plea. So you can't say I'm pleading guilty to a bunch of things, but I'm an innocent guy. Don't arrest me for this other thing. Don't press charges for this other thing. I don't buy it. You tried to shirk accountability. And so we're really not exaggerating when we say this reads as a very dishonest woe is me type of a thing. He doesn't address his business dealings in this, which have been the focus of a lot of public outcry. He makes it all about getting sober. And he's like, if you want to get sober, you can too. And we just didn't get any honesty in this. We're really not exaggerating at all.
No, and meanwhile, he is also accused of running this money laundering service through his very fantastic artwork that he apparently is getting millions of dollars per piece from, conveniently, people who have some stake in the Biden administration or President Joe Biden's success. So I didn't see anything about his new painting hobby in here and why his paintings are suddenly fetching millions of dollars. But maybe we'll have a new op-ed soon enough where he addresses some of these issues, but I highly doubt it. We'll be back with more Rising after this.